Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for waiting. I apologize for the slight delay. I bear full responsibility for it. Welcome to our regularly scheduled work session of Monday, February 6, 2023 of the Haverford Township Board of Commissioners. Mr. Berman, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Gondik.
Present.
Commissioner Forsty Grupp.
Here.
Commissioner McCluskey.
Here.
Commissioner Cavender.
Here.
Commissioner Quinn.
Here.
Commissioner Hart. Commissioner Wexler.
Here.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Here.
Commissioner Holmes.
Here. Chief, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
One nation. Indivisible, with justice.
Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. We have a fairly significant agenda tonight. We're going to jump right into it. Our first presentation tonight will be the pension investment managers and providing our 2022 performance update. I will first invite Mr. Glacken, Mike Glacken of CBIZ INR Advisory Services, LLC. Welcome back, Mr. Glacken. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Here's hoping for the latter.
Yeah. Well, the fourth quarter, first quarter of 2022, both plans, both managers. The conviction you need to stay the course. This was the first time in my 30-year career that we did not have an opportunity to go and rebalance and buy stocks at a significant discount when we had a bear market. Both bonds and stocks were down, almost directly correlated. However, we were fortunate. We were given the charge of the all-indexed approach. That's we're known as passive pension managers. We now handle over 135 different communities throughout the Commonwealth. And we've never had more conviction around that approach than when we do now. At the same time, the blended teamwork of us and PFM has worked extremely well over the long run. We're more the beta approach, the all-market approach. For the year of 2022, we were down 15.16%. The overall blended benchmark was down roughly 15.44. PFM then uses more of a core satellite approach, so they've had the opportunity through historically to take more alpha and try to get higher than benchmark performance. Fortunately, since our inception, we've been able to use the index approach with strategic management. So we've beaten the benchmark and paid for our fees and been above the benchmark, which is our ultimate goal. But it really has been kind of a yin and yang approach. It's worked well. And because you've been staying the course also so far this year, markets are up both on the bond side and stock side, but you've been rewarded because stocks have done better than bonds so far year to date. Also using that as more of a learning experience to let clients know, typically in a bear market, you do see what are called bear market rallies, where the market goes up and then back down again. But normally in a recovery, and when you hear the word recession, the market's already priced that in. And about the time you're here in recession is when the market's already come back. And it comes back pretty violently. It comes back much faster than it goes down. So you've been rewarded already for staying the course. We're recommending to stay the course. You have there's more of a likelihood or probability you're going to hit your assumed interest rate by leaning towards stocks than bonds. But the other good news, Mr. Holmes, is the fact that now, if we have a bear market correction, given that the bond market has moved up and we've had more than 400% increases by the Fed, we would have a buying opportunity. And eventually we would look smart for buying the stock market cheap if there is another correction. I just can't tell you when. So stay the course, continue doing what we're doing, and over the long run, our job together is to take the least amount of risk that gets you the highest return, and historically we've proven to be able to do that. So I'll bring up Bikram.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. So just to continue to echo Mike's comments, when we think about last year, when we think about the capital markets, it was a historic year across many measures. And when we think about the drivers to that, we saw interest rates, as Mike alluded to, climb at its fastest clip in history. We saw fixed income markets underperform, equity markets underperform, and I was just sharing with Mike that the last time equity markets and fixed income markets have been down greater than 10% together, you have to go back to the 1800s. And so, we always talk about these tail events, and to think that we had a tail event in 2020 and again in 2022, the hope is that we won't see one for quite some time, but, we'll see. Keep our fingers crossed. But the importance of remaining diversified is imperative. The good news is when we think about asset class returns and when we think about the markets moving forward, our expectation is that with the repricing of equity markets, that we anticipate higher equity market returns over the next 5 years based on our capital market assumptions. And finally, with fixed income, we'll start to see some income as part of the asset class and part of a component of the return. And so we are expecting some higher returns out of fixed income as well. And so our intermediate term expectations for portfolios are certainly higher than they were this time last year as a result of what happened over the course of 2022. PFM's portfolio, so we were down about 16.89% for the year. We slightly trailed the benchmark. When we take a look over the last 9 years, 7 of the 9 years, calendar years, we've outperformed the benchmark. So there have been only 2 instances where we've underperformed over the last 9, one of which was last year. And most of that attributed to some of the active managers that we had within international equity and their underperformance. And so while that was our performance, as Mike mentioned, we do split the portfolio roughly 50-50. And so the impact to the portfolio wasn't as much, down 15.82% relative to the benchmark of 15.44. So with that, I will stop my remarks and see if there are any questions.
2 thoughts, if I could. Number one, in terms of absolute value, I guess outperforming a negative benchmark is technically outperforming it, right?
Yeah, it is technically.
But more important, are there any we use certain assumed rates of return on our pensions. Is there any adjustments that we're going to need to make going forward based on what happened in the market in the last 2 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we think about the pension funds, the discount rate is 7.5%, and that valuation process takes place every 2 years. And so the goal is to earn a cumulative return of 15% over 2 calendar years, and the valuations take place at the end of each even year. Our expectation, based on our assumptions of where assets will return for the next 5 years, we think that we should be able to get to that 15% cumulative over 2-year periods over the next 5 years, over the intermediate term. And so at this point, we wouldn't suggest a meaningful change to strategy. In fact, with Mike earning beta, rebalancing, remaining disciplined, and then with PFM's approach of tactically overweighting and underweighting, we've been able to capture some upside. And if you take a look at the historical performance over 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, we've been able to outperform what the market has provided. And so with our expectations being what they are over the next 5 years, the hope is that we're able to continue with that pattern and also add additional alpha. So we should be able to get to that number based on those.
And is our presumed value of 7.5%, is that still conservative even in this?
So I think, in taking a look at where municipalities are going, and this is comments more from actuaries and what they're seeing, we're starting to see municipalities trend downward, looking at 7.25%, looking at 7%. But you have to take a look at those numbers in the context of every township and the specificities and nuances that exist. But we are seeing, just thinking about our clients, and I'll let Mike also comment, and I think we're seeing clients come down from that 7.5%. That used to be the old normal, but I'd say the central tendency is probably coming down towards 7 at this point. I don't know, Mike, if there's anything you'd add to that.
Yeah, the median across the Commonwealth now is 7.2. 7.5. You just look back a few years ago, 7.5 was much below the mean.
Way below. Right?
Yeah, and
you come up to
now
the
what
mic?
you're seeing.
Mike, why don't you come up to the mic?
Yeah, so the new median has now moved down to 7.2 2.25, and it really is a matter of as Vikram was saying, it's like a mortgage. You either pay now or you're going to pay along the way. If you move the assumed interest rate down, that's going to cost, your MMO and your funding level also move down. So there's a cost to it either way. By keeping up with your MMO every other year, you're keeping up with what the Commonwealth is requesting you to do on a funding level. So you're not falling behind in funding. You're keeping up exactly with what the Commonwealth is telling you to do. And as Vic said, there's much more likelihood, believe it or not, looking forward, that we're going to get closer to that assumed interest rate than last year. When we came to you last year, that same question was asked. Stocks were overvalued and bonds weren't making any return. Now we're going to be able to take less risk and get the same output. So right now you're right in line, and we'll keep doing what we do.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions for our colleagues here?
I just have one quick question to make sure I understood something. You'd indicated that you were on track to make the 15% over the 2-year period over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
So are you saying that over a period, that average of 15% for 2 years, or it's going to take you 5 years to get to the 2-year period?
That's a very good question, Commissioner, and I can see how that might have gotten a little confusing. So what we do at PFM, every year we take a look at the capital markets and we generate an expectation for what we expect capital markets to return. And we do that over 2 time horizons. We do it over an intermediate term time horizon, which assumes the next 5 years. So what do we expect portfolios to earn over a 5-year period? And then we do it over the long term. And as a result of what happened last year, as Mike alluded to, valuations have come down, fixed income interest rates are now up. Markets are much more attractive on a value basis. And so our expectation and our outlook is that over the next 5 years, on an annual basis, we actually expect portfolios to return a higher return than they did previously. And so what our goal is when we look at returns is every 2 years to try to earn that 15% cumulative number. And so the chances are to earn that 15% is higher right now than it was last year or years prior because of where markets are as a result of last year. Does that make sense?
That does. Thank you for clarifying that.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Thank you both. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work,
Thank you for
Ms.
the
Township.
opportunity.
Next on our agenda is a presentation by Mr. Schlesinger, an update on the underwriting selection process for 2023 general obligation bonds for the township.
All right. I go to the next page. Good evening. So I am also from PFM, just a different PFM than them. So just a full clarification here. So I was here about a few weeks back, and we discussed the next steps of the potential financing related to a number of capital projects. The step was to go through a process to solicit and hopefully approve an underwriter, which is another piece of the puzzle for our finance team. The underwriter is the firm that would find the investors for the ultimate bond issue. In the past, we've traditionally done that through a full-on competitive process that's done over the internet. In this particular case, due to some complexities of the transaction, let's go to this page because it'll tell you everything, we suggested that we should go through a hybrid competitive process. So tonight we're going to discuss the results of that hybrid competitive process. We went to 5 separate regional and ultimately national firms and asked them to provide us essentially a proposal based on a standardized interest rate amortization schedule, as well as providing us their cost associated with the transaction, which is essentially their commission, and there was any additional costs related to legal sides. We put all of those information together on one day. They provide us the proposals back on the 24th of January, and we analyzed them, and whoever provided us the lowest overall cost would be the winner. Now, with the understanding that what they're providing us is not the final locked-in interest rates. Given that the township is going to be, working through its final decisions on the capital projects and how much they'll cost, I understand you'll be discussing the library in the coming weeks. Once you make some other determinations of what you may want to borrow, we would come back with that underwriting firm. In this case, we're suggesting would be Janney Montgomery Scott out of Philadelphia to be the underwriter. At that time, we would work with them and my pricing group to lock in the overall interest rates as quickly as we can. So the process that we went through was simple enough. We asked them to put proposals back to us based on an assumed amortization schedule on a particular date. We provided that information in our analysis, and whoever was the lowest interest rate won. So I'm just going to go to the next page. You can see we did it for both series of bonds. We're suggesting that we're going to do this with two series. One is going to be tax-free and one will be taxable. The tax-free one is going to be the larger of the two, so that's going to drive the winner ultimately. Based on the proposal, if you look at that column, section 1 in yellow, Janney's overall true interest cost is 3.69%. The second place was Raymond James. RBC was after that at 3.82. PNC was 3.87, and Stiefel was 4.05. So there was a wide range, but generally the kind of top ones were pretty close together. We took into account also their costs, so each one of them provided us their estimate. Janney's underwriter's commission will be $3.47 per bond. So you multiply that by the principal amount is outstanding, is actually what their cost will be. And then they also have a legal counsel that will work on their behalf, which was included in the analysis as well. We don't know who that is yet, but we at least know what the estimated cost is. Putting all those things together, that's how we determine the ultimate winner. With regard to the taxable, again, a much smaller piece as we're expecting. The estimate here, theirs would be about 4.55%. They were actually not the lowest. In this case, Raymond James was, but there's no economics to having two separate firms do that small piece. So given that it was very, very close and the driver of this is the tax-free, again, we suggest to use Janney Montgomery Scott here. These are just numbers on a page. This just gives you an idea of what the results would be if we were to price the bonds on that particular day. Over the course of time, as we make these decisions, we will come back with actual results and discuss what those would be. But based on our estimates, these give you an idea of what the total cost would be from an interest rate standpoint.
Mr. Schlesser, two questions. Sure. One, between the Series A and the Series B, what's the proportion?
It's
5 to 1?
20 plus million on the Series A and 2 million on the Series B. It's
So like a 9 to 1 or a 10 to 1 ratio?
It's very small, yeah.
Good.
And that may change slightly depending on the projects, but it's going to be much, much bigger on the tax rate.
And if this is an idiotic question, I apologize in advance. But the Underwriters Council charges is overall one charge for the underwriting this entire deal. It's not two different fees attached to both.
It'll be one for the whole thing. Yes, that's correct. Correct.
Boy, that's a tough gig. Times have changed when I did this 20 years ago.
In the case of these transactions, it depends on what they're doing. I know you've had history in the past. In some cases, when we have an underwriters council and they're making the official
Creating
statement,
the statement, yeah.
we're doing that on your behalf. So you're paying for that in that sense. So they're doing less work. In this case, they're working on the continuing disclosure side, helping prepare the bond purchase agreement and some other things and reviewing documents. But their job is lessened in this particular transaction.
Is it a $15,000 charge? Or?
It's $7,500 in total.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, we just have it on one summary. Yeah, to be honest, there's not much more to say except that, we did do a fair, competitive process. This is what the understanding was from the underwriters that were bidding on it. They knew that based on our recommendation, based on whoever the lowest overall cost was, would be the winner. They all sharpened their pencils in this particular case. We've, obviously not finalized this until, you felt you were comfortable with this. We would be asking you to consider at your next meeting a short resolution that would authorize moving forward with just Janney on this. That does not hold you to doing a financing at all. All that would do is just kind of lock in us the ability to get some documents prepared on behalf of Janney Montgomery Scott and getting us prepared to do the ordinance in the near future. But none of these decisions you're making locks you into doing any transaction.
And Mr. Schlesinger, for the benefit of my colleagues who haven't done this before, there's a role for another attorney in this matter, and that is bond counsel.
Yes.
And bond counsel is the counsel who ultimately approves and validates the the tax-free nature of the bonds, issues opinions to the township, and ultimately issues the opinion to the public that this is a good tax-free bond. And then there is underwriter counsel. Are there any other counsels?
The only other counsel is your solicitor.
Is our own solicitor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so there'll be 3 separate lawyers in the transaction, 2 of which technically work on your behalf. The underwriter's counsel works on behalf of the underwriter.
What is the purpose or benefit of issuing the 2 different series, the tax-free and the taxable?
It's, once we decide the final use of the project itself, if there is a need to do it taxable, a portion of it, we have to keep that separate because the tax-free interest rates are different than the taxable interest rates, so we have to separate them out. So there'll be investors for the tax-exempt portion, and there'll be different investors for the taxable portion.
But the determination of what goes into which category is based on what the funding is being utilized for.
Correct.
So is it, just hypothetically speaking, is it possible that at the end of the day, we wind up only going with the Series A?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the only other question I would have, just for my own kind of edification, I'm just trying to gauge the correlation between the true interest cost and the underwriting discount, because it looks like PNC Capital Markets, their bond discount is substantially different, and I'm looking at the Series A.
Yep.
Is substantially different from their competitors, yet their true interest cost, is one of the highest. Can you
Sure.
explain exactly what happened
That's a
there?
great question, and actually happens in most of our competitive sales when we go online. What drives mostly the true interest cost is the interest rates that they're offering. So it's such a large issuance that the interest overall is what mathematically figures out what the yield is. So we build the cost into the model, but because it's a $20+ million transaction, a difference of a couple basis points makes up between the 2.63 and the $3.
Okay.
That's the big difference. So in some cases, when we do competitive sales, the winner could have a much higher underwriter's discount than a loser because they provide us just a better overall interest rate on the bond issue. And that's the way we should think about it. We want the overall lowest cost of the transaction. Whether they're going to get paid a little bit more to do that, we shouldn't care. We want them,
Yeah, no, I
because
agree.
that's where the interest comes from.
Okay.
Is it
I
like
appreciate you
paying
clarifying.
points on a mortgage?
In some sense, yes. Yep. And again, we're building it into the model, so it is a true understanding of what the cost will be to you. So in real life, the yield on this transaction, and I'm getting real technical here, is not 3.63, maybe 3.5, but the cost is kind of built into that, and that's how we figure out the math.
Thank you.
I have nothing else to present except that, as you make some determinations, we'll provide you, we'll be back again. You will see a different lawyer. You'll see Bill Richter. He's your bond counsel. He'll prepare the necessary ordinance for consideration at that meeting. Right now, we're estimating that would be in the April meeting to give you some more time to decide what you want to do.
Oh, is that right? The April meeting is when we're going to do the bond resolution?
Yeah, I did bring that with me just in case if we want to talk about it, but that's the current thought at this point. So if we do move forward at that time at your April 12th, I believe, meeting, and we lock in interest rates pretty much after that, because we now will have the full team in hand here, we can move as quickly as possible, and then we'll settle sometime in May.
So for our consideration next week is your recommendation of the appointment of the underwriter.
That's it. Again, nothing ties you to do anything else besides having them as part of the team at that point in time.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Schlesinger?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will see you in a month or so. Close that up.
Next on our agenda is a presentation by Paul Spiegel of Spence, Stevens, and McCoy. Mr. Spiegel will be providing us with an energy audit report.
Thanks, everybody.
Welcome.
We delivered the audit report early in January. It's a little over 40 pages, so I'm not going to go into all the details right now because I'd like to get out of here before tomorrow evening. Listen. So what I did was just put a couple of slides from the executive summary of the report up here so that the public can see what you're all looking at. I think you were all provided with an electronic copy. So just to kind of give some background on this, we were hired by the township to do level 1 energy audits on 6 buildings here in the township. A level 1 audit, it's a code-defined audit, and it's also called a walkthrough audit, where you're really just walking through the buildings, taking some inventory of equipment, and looking at the utility bills and providing some recommendations without a lot of engineering or deep financial calculations. The people that work for me don't really know how to do a level 1 audit. We end up doing level 2 audits, which are closer to investment grade, have engineering and financial analysis. And so we went a little deeper on the 3 main buildings that we were focused on as part of this, which are this admin building, the stadium, and the CREC, the Community Rec and Environmental Center. And those 3 together use up significantly more energy, and they're more heavily occupied than any of the other buildings here in the township. So we developed a long list of recommendations for each building. Some of them are pretty basic. You know, this building is fairly, the heating and air conditioning system is the largest energy user in this building. And so but that system is fairly new. And so one of the things we're looking at in this report are things that might need to be replaced in the near future. We're not recommending taking out something that's just been built or installed just to put in something that's a little more efficient. So here in the admin building, it was mainly operations, looking at the building automation system, which manages the heating and air conditioning throughout the building, and that is by far the highest energy user. By the way, if you have any questions, whether related to what I'm talking about or not, I want to make sure we get in enough time for you to ask any of those questions. Getting to the stadium, that was where we had the most detail and the most recommendations. We had about 13 or 14 energy saving recommendations, and many of these recommendations will pay for themselves out of energy savings in a period of 3 to 5 years. And I think overall, the whole list of recommendations that we provided has an average payback of about 9.5 years. And I have a couple of things to say about that in a few minutes. But Public Works building, it's pretty bare bones. Heating and lighting are really the main energy users. The CREC, that is a fairly new building. It's got geothermal. I think it was LEED certified green building. If not, it was just designed to meet the requirements of green building standards. But we did note that there's still older fluorescent lights there, and so LED lights are a good option to look at for that. There's also some minor issues with the building automation system. It appears that the fans run all the time, so the heat comes on, you have hot air coming out of the vents, it reaches the set point in the room, and the heat goes off, but the fan keeps running, so it's blowing colder air. And if you're bringing in outside air ventilation, which you would be, it's actually going to blow cold air, so you're either feeling a little warm or a little cool, depending on how often it's cycling. I'm not going to get into the smaller buildings really, but see if I made this large enough to see. Nope, I got it as large as I could. So this just lists all of the actual recommendations that we made has the current use of electricity, actually the electricity savings, natural gas savings, and then determines the payback for each of the recommendations that we made. We also did a solar feasibility on each of the buildings, and one great thing that just recently happened, it's kind of a game changer for municipalities and school districts, is that nonprofits and government agencies are now able to get a tax credit. It's not a tax credit, it's actually a direct payment, but a 30% direct payment back for putting in solar. There was always a limitation for municipalities because they couldn't get that 30%, that most municipalities entered into what's called a power purchase agreement. A private company would install the solar and sell the electricity to the building owner. And that private entity was able to take advantage of the 30% tax credit, which the township or municipality can't. But now with the Inflation Reduction Act, both geothermal and solar are direct payment eligible for a municipality. So really a game changer, making everything 30% cheaper. I think originally when we did this table, the paybacks were around 15 or 14 years. I'm not sure about your bond financing that I just heard about, but typically if you can get a 20-year financing, and this pays for itself in 11 years, you're actually cash flow positive from day one when you're borrowing money, because you'll get to that 10 or 11 years when it's paid back, and you've only paid off half the loan at that point. Now, another wrinkle that came up while we were looking at the buildings, your electricity rates have gone up. You had a locked-in contract for a very low rate. So we actually went back and recomputed all of the paybacks using the new higher rate. But it just makes doing energy projects that much more productive, and they pay for themselves much more quickly. Now, do you want me to go through any of the specific recommendations for the stadium? Get into detail on that, or maybe pick a few, or not sure what the needs are of your group right now.
I mean, if we're talking about the stadium, I'll just throw it out there. The one question I have a couple questions ultimately, but it looks like you had spec'd out a variety of recommendations. One that you touched on but didn't really give much detail about was synthetic ice.
Yeah, well, we research everything when we're looking at a building like that. I'm not sure the purist would be okay with that, but according to my engineer, all the research he did, that it's indistinguishable from real ice when you're skating on it. But I've a Flyers season ticket holder for 38 years, and if my kids were playing there and I heard they were getting synthetic ice, I might wonder about it. But if you can actually do it, we could find a location where they actually installed it, and maybe people could check it out, because it would save huge amounts of money, and I'm not sure what the maintenance is, but we put it in as the last recommendation. I wouldn't spend an inordinate amount of time on that. Another thing with the stadium, there were some pieces of equipment that are in a failed state right now, and there's some temporary equipment running. That definitely impacts the energy use and the comfort and the operation of all the other equipment in the building. Everything is tied together, the air temperature, the humidity, the heating, the cooling, that are all going on in that building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So anything that kind of breaks down part of that chain of control of the indoor environment can have a big impact on cost and wear and tear on the equipment as well. One thing across all the buildings, there's still a lot of fluorescent lights in the building, in all of the buildings, actually. And there's a program right now from PICO that goes through, I think, the end of June right now, where you can get LED lights through their midstream direct install or midstream direct purchase program. If you do the direct install, you'll get the LED lights installed for about 40% of the market price if you were going out to market to have that done. So instead of a 5 to 7 year payback, they're going to pay for themselves in a couple of years. With the midstream supply program, you can get them for about $1 per lamp, which is like 80% off the usual price or more. So it's something I would recommend looking into right away. Actually, one of our school clients, the program just started a couple of months ago, and we made the recommendation in a meeting like this to their board of trustees, and a week later, they had approved it, and the week after that, all of their lights in their campus had been changed over to LED. So it was something, it was, you know, it's almost getting free money and free equipment that's going to help you with both saving energy directly, and also those lights produce, LED lights produce less heat, so your air conditioning doesn't have to work as hard.
Could you, I see one of the recommendations in several of the buildings was to prioritize the efficient operation and thorough monitoring of facilities, building automation system, the
Yeah.
BAS. Can you just explain a little bit about what you mean by that
Okay.
recommendation?
There's a building automation system in this building, one in the CREC as well. And it's a computerized system that you can set schedules and set points for air temperature in different rooms throughout the building. It's all programmed in so that no one has to run around turning thermostats up and down to make sure you're keeping your building comfortable. One of the biggest impacts of it is when you can set it back for unoccupied periods. I do a long story sometimes about people not leaving their cars running in their driveway overnight when it's cold out. Like last Friday night, you wouldn't leave your car running all night just so you don't have to get in a cold car in the morning. But people do it with their buildings all the time. They run the heat and the air conditioning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, I know part of this building is occupied, but not the whole thing. And so you can use those systems to kind of make sure that you're setting things back and not ventilating with outside air and heating the air when there's no one in the building.
How easy is it to do that? It seems that's been something that's come up in meetings that I've been in for the 4 or 5 years I've been here, which we need to improve the automation, but it seems like you're still finding there's an issue there.
It is functional. I think the Stadium has some issues with their building automation system, but this building, it was in pretty good shape and should be pretty flexible. And you can write, it can get pretty deep. You can write some advanced control sequences that optimize things like when you're air conditioning, you're producing chilled water. It runs through a heat exchanger. The fans blow air across it to cool the air. It can actually optimize the most efficient way to operate. Is it going to be making the water, like if it's really hot out, it can make the water colder or increase the pump speed so the water's going faster through the building, or increase the fan speed so there's more air going across the heat exchanger. And so having knowledge of that, and a lot of people that install the systems don't get into those advanced control systems or control sequences, but it can kind of automatically find the optimum way for you to use energy in your building.
Would that involve us getting someone who can run the system better than?
Yeah, I don't recall who's actually, if it's someone in-house that kind of runs it day to day and then calls when they need programming support. But we found many that are set up improperly, I guess. So we just did an evaluation at Springfield Township in Montgomery County, and they had a 3-year-old building, and they had 3 buildings that they had us look at, but the one that had the worst energy performance was the newest building. And so we went in and looked at the controls, because obviously the equipment's efficient, it's brand new. Went in and looked at the controls, and they were bringing in 100% outside air, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even though the building was only occupied like 80 or 70 hours a week. And the issue with that is, like during heating season, you're bringing in 20-degree air from outside and having to heat it to 120 degrees to blow into your space and heat the room. You can actually set it up so there's an optimal mix, but they were bringing in 100% outside air, and all their ventilation fans were running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We probably charged them $2,000 to do the report, and the first year savings were about $14,000 to $15,000.
I wanted to make sure that I understood correctly. Did you say this building is set up pretty okay? And it's the other building that's the
Not
issue?
that it's set up well, but it has the capability to be set up. It has functioning elements to it, where
Okay.
there's some failed elements in the stadium.
Oh, in the
building.
stadium, there are failed elements, but the building automation system in this building just needs to be programmed a little bit better, is what you're informing us.
Yeah, I mean, there's always upgrades. You know, some of our clients go to new versions of the same software every 2 to 4 years, but most will kind of run it as long as they can get support. We have clients that buy Windows 95 computers because their control system only runs on Windows 95, and they have like 6 of them in the facilities office, so they're ready to put the next one up when the one that's in use fails. And they don't want to pay the money to do the upgrade.
That estimated 30% savings overall that you have, that potentially we could get, what part of that is the stadium? If we did everything in the stadium, is that 60% of the savings, or?
80.
Let me check. It should be right here.
Jerry, I think the total savings that you had estimated were about, if we did all of your recommendations, I believe the total was about $77,000 annually.
Yeah.
And I think if I read this chart correctly, about 60-some thousand of that is coming from the stadium. So it'd be about 80% of the savings would be related to the skate. It looks like the skate, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like the stadium accounts for approximately 50% of our total energy consumption on a monetary basis, and then
For those 6 buildings.
the savings would be about 80%.
Yes.
So I have a question, going back to renewable energy measures.
Yeah.
You said that with the 30% pay, IRA credit, that the payback on these systems would be 11 years. Can you tell us what the lifetime is of solar panels?
Well, they degrade a little bit every year, probably a percent or so. But we usually look at a 25-year life for those. And if you're borrowing money from any of the specialized energy funding sources, they run it out at 25 years.
So
for
in
the
other words,
financial analysis.
if we went with solar panels, they would pay for themselves. They would be paid for in 11 years, and then they would just be
Generated.
earning us more money.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just to ask a follow-up on that, so when they pick 25 years, are they picking that because and I don't know the answer to this, but are they picking that because it matches a certain depreciation schedule, or is that based on the technology itself?
No, there's actually accelerated depreciation for solar panels. You can depreciate them much more quickly than that. It's just where enough of the cells have failed that it's just not operating at a high enough output for the size. I don't know that it ever completely dies out and stops working. Yeah, the service, it'll go beyond 25 years, but that's kind of considered the productive service life of a solar array.
As part of this study, did you look at, you mentioned solar, but look at the buildings and which ones would be most adaptable to using solar on?
Yeah, actually, they all had some measure of ability to do solar. Now, some are, actually, they're all pretty much mounted on rooftops. You're not blocked by shade or with a lot of other equipment on the rooftops that would completely lock out doing solar. Some of your larger users would be good first steps if you're looking to do a little bit at a time. But I was made aware by the EAC that the township is committed to CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. You can make great strides towards that by doing these kind of things that pay for themselves. The other thing that we've recommended to a lot of our clients is to have some sort of energy management policy, and that would cover purchasing equipment. So when you're purchasing computers or leasing copiers or things like that, they're Energy Star. When you're managing a building, you are managing the building automation system to set back at night and to control things effectively. And not only are you getting savings out of doing that, but when less run time on the motors and the fans and the pumps, they're going to last longer. So you can end up, we've had buildings where we shut them down by about 70% of the run time, and that's going to extend the service life for years going forward. Geothermal is also eligible for the 30% direct payment. That's through, I think that's going to last for a couple of years, and then it's going to step down to a lower percentage.
Are heat pumps eligible?
Sorry.
Are heat pumps eligible?
Only for residential under the IRA.
Are heat pumps, are they as efficient as solar panels in terms of payback over their lifetime?
Heat pumps allow you to divest yourself of fossil fuels.
Right.
And allows you to put solar on to run 100% of your building if you want to do that. It's definitely a goal for me in my house but the solar installer wants me to cut down the 4 trees that shade the house. So it's kind of hard to give that up. But the heat pumps are more efficient than standard heating and cooling units, rooftop package units, or even natural gas. More efficient, but a little more expensive. But if you have a goal of getting to net zero energy or net zero carbon emissions, you really need to be, especially with new construction, need to be trying to make that net zero. Because otherwise, let's say you design a building that'll be 20% better than code in energy performance, you're still putting in an 80% of that fossil fuel use that you'll then have to go and replace at some point if you're really committing to that difficult goal. So it takes a little bit of commitment. You can't just do everything you've been doing all along and reach those kind of goals. But you can really make a big difference by engaging in these things.
I see, in addition to the gas and electric numbers that were run, on the chiller recommendation for the stadium, there's also 175,000 gallons of water. So I'm assuming that means that if we go with the, upgrades or the changes to the chiller system, we would save that much water. One, is that correct? A correct assumption? Two, is that savings of that water, is that factored into the cost savings that you calculated on this sheet?
I don't believe the water savings were included. I think they were just energy savings.
Okay, so there's would be the potential for more additional economic savings based on a lower water bill.
Sure. And at lunch today, we sometimes brainstorm about things at lunch, and someone came up with the idea of when the Zamboni cleans the ice and you have to dump ice, to build a little vault where they can dump it and have some pipes run through with heat exchangers and provide chilled water for the cooling for the building, pre-chilled, and it melts the ice. And it's something that some of the schools in the region do, but they make ice just for doing cooling. They make ice at night when electricity is cheaper, and then they run the cooling through the ice vault during the day when it's really hot out. And they save huge amounts of money on their peak demand as well as their consumption. So it's just back of the head kind of thing to think about for the future. See if I have anything else. No. Any other questions or comments? I'm not sure if this was being submitted for just acknowledgement or a question. You can feel free to filter questions to us if you have any going forward, and we'll have
We will. This has been very informative. I appreciate it. Certainly, we're going to consider all these. It seems to me, based upon your step-by-step analysis, that we have a significant menu here of things that we could do, that each one of these opportunities seem to be standalone and
Yes.
but create their own savings. I like that idea about recycling the ice at the stadium. I do admit I'm going to be the last person alive who goes for synthetic ice at the stadium. And I need to say that out loud for everybody, all of our skaters in the stadium. Evaluating synthetic ice is not replacing the ice at the stadium, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I
Not
think
at
if you
all.
just said you're
You just-
evaluating it, you could get in trouble just for that.
Just for saying,
and I
yes.
would have had the same I had the same reaction when I saw
Mr.
it.
Gondik,
but-
when we do synthetic ice in your drinks at the Brick and Brew, we'll do synthetic ice at the stadium. These are all, this is extremely helpful for us. I appreciate the
And
data.
as you're prioritizing things, if you're, it's always good to be looking at it at budget time to see what you can do the following year. And, if you need any support on that, you can let us know.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments? Mr. Spiegel. Thank you very much for a
Thank you.
significant report.
Thanks.
Next on our agenda, we are going to have a discussion of the economic recovery payment for seniors, widowers, and permanently disabled individuals, led by our Vice President, Commissioner Trombetta.
Thank you, Mr. President. So tonight I'd like to have a discussion amongst my colleagues about a proposal to use up to $302,500 of Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds, or ARPA funds, to provide one-time $500 economic recovery payments to economically disadvantaged seniors of ages 65 and older, widowers ages 50 to 64, and permanently disabled residents between the ages of 18 and 64. These populations represent a group of township residents who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and the subsequent economic downturn our country has faced. A $500 economic recovery payment has the potential of helping some of our most vulnerable residents in Haverford Township so that they can pay for at least a month of groceries, the roof over their heads, or other basic necessities. It also has the added benefit of potentially supporting our local economy. In terms of who will be eligible for this economic recovery payment, this program mirrors the state of Pennsylvania's annual property tax and rent rebate program. The individuals who would qualify under the program would be one of the aforementioned populations and be township homeowners who have a household income of $35,000 or less annually, or renters who have an income of $15,000 or less annually. It's important to note that half of Social Security is excluded in the calculation, so the annual income may be, in fact, a little bit higher. It's also worth noting that the state's program limits one application per household. Given the information I received from Senator Capoletti's office, who got it from the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, there were 537 households in Haverford Township who qualified for the state program in 2020. The $302,500 that is proposed allows the township to be able to fully fund the number of applications that we think we can realistically expect to receive. It does provide a little bit of a buffer there. To obtain the $500 payment from the township, an eligible household member must complete an application with the township and provide documentation that proves that they are approved by the state's property tax rent rebate program, which could be either a copy of the check or a printout of the Where's My Rebate webpage that demonstrates that they've been approved. If we move forward with this, we would set a date for the program to start, but I'm proposing that we close it on December 15th, allowing for ample time for applications to come in, to be received, and to be approved. The township has received approximately $19.8 million in ARPA funds. Through 12/31/2022, the township has spent $2.18 million, or 11% of those funds. I'm proposing using about 1.5% of those funds to help support low-income seniors, our permanently disabled, and our widowers. And I'm hoping that this really stimulates the economy. So with that said, I'm asking for my colleagues' consideration for this economic recovery payment program. The item is not on the agenda next week, so because I wanted to provide ample time for real consideration, for public input. But if I have the support of my colleagues, I would like to move forward in March with a resolution.
Thank you, Commissioner Trombetta. Does any of our colleagues have any questions?
I don't really have a question, but I have a comment. I think this is, to me, sort of the essence of what ARPA money is for, is helping people who have been directly impacted in this way. 17% of our population are seniors, and so helping the lowest income folks of that group makes a lot of sense to me. So I appreciate you coming up with this way for us to, at the township level, support our citizens using federal money so it doesn't cost the township anything.
Thank you, Commissioner Cavender. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question, and it's more of communication. So how will we make sure, what steps can we take to make sure that everyone knows about this program and whether they're eligible? Because I really don't want someone to say, I didn't know, I couldn't apply, I missed the deadline. So what steps can we take if we're going to move this forward?
Commissioner Trombetta, go ahead.
I would suggest we determine a communications plan when we ultimately pass the plastic pollution reduction ordinance. I worked with some of the township staff and really credit goes to them for preparing a communications plan that helped adequately communicate that this was about to pass. I do think having a deadline of December 15th allows for some ample time there as well to be able to communicate that, but I do expect to use, our social media and other media sources to be able to communicate that. I'm not sure, admittedly, if we can do a mailing, because I don't know that information is really available.
I also think we'd just work with, you mentioned that the language of seniors, widows, and permanently disabled and the standards you're using are based on a state program that provides services and rebates for these individuals. So we would certainly, I would think we would want to create sort of an information pamphlet and make that available to both our state rep, our state senator, and anybody, so that anybody who's applying for programs through the state would also get the information that they can apply through the township. And it's, that way it would be hard copy, something that they could envision, as they're waiting in the lobby. It's one of the pamphlets of information that is provided there.
Commissioner Trombetta, is this a rolling deadline? Or does everyone have to wait until December 15th?
No, potentially it would open, we would set a date. If we pass this resolution in March, I think we would open up a program like this in April to really get ourselves together, but then they can apply whenever they get approved by the state.
The only question I have with regards to this is from an administrative point of view. Who are we tasking with administering this kind of from a clerical and, bring in the paperwork, send out the checks?
I'd be relying on our finance department over there, Ms. Cuthbertson.
Tag, you're it.
Is
Well,
December,
the good news, if I just add to that, though, is that it is at that point, and I don't say this pejoratively, we're talking about at that point a purely ministerial act. This applicant would have to have already satisfied state requirement. So we aren't adding a level of review or another impediment. This is just confirmation that somebody is on a published state list, and then just going through with the award. Is that correct?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. So if the vetting process is that they've been approved just for this particular state grant, then from a notification point of view, it would seem kind of easy. We would mail out 530 letters to the people who've been approved. Or are we trying to expand the applicant, not the applicant pool, but I guess is it just, if you're approved for this grant and you put in for ours, you get ours, in which case we're only looking at a maximum of 530 people. We can send them a letter saying, this is what you can do, you get it. Or is that not what you envisioned?
That would be correct, but I don't know how to identify those individuals. So I don't think the state, I don't know that the state would provide that information to a township.
And if
Oh,
we're,
okay, I
if
see
we're,
what you're
if we're
saying.
doing this just on a one-year basis, I don't know if the state's going to go through Yeah, I would agree with you that I don't think the state's. gonna
Okay,
give us-
and that's why I wasn't sure whether the
Because ours-
state would share that
the state-
information or not.
The state's probably a running program that has,
That makes sense.
But don't they do it by tax year? So they'd have the list for our municipality by tax ID and location. Because they're basing it on property tax, which gives you down the parcel and tax ID number. So we just need to get that list.
The question would be whether they share it or not, I guess.
We
we could
have
try.
to ask.
We could ask.
But that's a public record, though. I mean, it's like a freedom of information to find out who got a rebate in our municipality. I mean, it's tough. I applaud
Not
you,
sure if that-
but we just raised their taxes, township property taxes by 1.8% this year, too. So we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul because they're households in the township. So it's, and it's just, it's 537 out of ARPA money designed for infrastructure is a very small amount for a very small group when we have infrastructure that needs to be repaired and fixed. I use the example of, we've been trying to replace street light poles in the township for years. There's so many and it's so expensive. And now we have this 19 million to do it and we're not taking advantage of it. But we're satisfying a very small percentage of residents out of the 49,000 residents that we do have with $350,000, which could do other stuff like sewer repairs and all the other infrastructure that ARPA was designed to generate jobs for repair. So it's a tough call, but that list, if it's 537, we should be able to get that list from the state. Our state senator should be able to get it for us. And it would also help our administrative. How do you validate? Because if I just need a copy of something, not that I'm going to call anybody dishonest, but we live in a township now where we're told we can't even put our checks in a mailbox because they're going to get stolen. And now we're going to rely on the ability to duplicate something and generate something off a printer of a copy of something to there. Not that I'm not accusing anybody, but I think we owe it. We have to validate that they're the right people getting the right amount of money and it's not being taken advantage of. And we don't have a fraud unit in our finance department to track tax people, double Social Security payments. There's an Inquirer article today about a gentleman whose somebody got his Social Security number, filed his taxes ahead of him, he got the $7,000 refund, not the resident. So it's, how do we validate all this stuff? So there's a lot of questions on both the administrative side and the validity side of who gets it, but it's for a very small portion of our population. We just raised everybody else's taxes, and not to be discriminatory, but I might even qualify for this $500 because I'm 70 years old, retired now, income is way down. But how do we adjudicate this? And then you've got people with 4 and 5 kids that have lost their job because of the pandemic that could use $500 as well. And now we've become an agency, a welfare type of agency, settling up and giving dollars there. So it's a tough question. And we just raised taxes by 1.8%. If we had $300,000 available to just give away, why didn't we reduce the tax increase by $300,000 and make it a 1 point whatever tax increase to affect all our citizens is kind of the way it's a tough question. I got to go back to constituents that are out of work and everything just because they're 2 years below the age limit, they don't get the $500. But that list should be verifiable so that there's less work on our administration of the program, and we know that the state has validated it, and they've got the ability to double check the household information and all the income because the state income taxes are filed. And I'd rather see the state give them a 2% decrease in their property taxes because the school district piece of that is way more than ours, so would have a greater economic impact on our community. My thoughts.
Mr. President,
Commissioner Trombetta. Thank you, Commissioner Wexler.
couple things to say to that. First and foremost, in terms of identifying fraud. So the Where's My Rebate page is an online website by the state of Pennsylvania where you can verify that information relatively easily if they've been approved or not. So I think hopefully that works to address a lot of that issue. I think if somebody submitted an application, gave us just a paper copy of their approved check, for example, our finance department could quickly use that information, go onto the website, and confirm that in fact that person was approved by the state. Second, they didn't call ARPA funds and infrastructure funds. It does have guidelines, and the guidelines specifically state that among other things that you can use the money for is to help disproportionately impacted populations. And to I think, work to recover your economy, which is exactly what I think this bill does. And I just want to point out that, again, this is not mutually exclusive. So if you want to use some ARPA funds to improve street lighting, propose that, and I'm sure that we would consider using a portion of those funds for street lighting, just like I suspect that we'll be using it for new parks and playground equipment, potentially a new Brookline Park. We used it before for senior initiative grants. And this is one modest proposal to support our most vulnerable populations residents in the township. And again, it represents 1.5% of the ARPA funds that are available.
Any other questions or comments, anybody?
But as Bill said, or like, how about the ones who have lost their jobs and stuff, like the four or five, and have 4 or 5 kids, and the mom or dad lost their jobs? We could get called on that, like saying, what are we going to do for them? And I'm just like, I think this is a good start to that's what I always want to raise that point there, because that's
I'm happy to expand it to include other vulnerable populations.
Yeah, I will, if I may. I just will remind everybody that providing ARPA funds to individuals in specific groups is not unprecedented for this board. We've already done a couple of these programs. We've dealt with first responders, township employees, volunteer firefighters, other groups. We've done businesses that were affected by ARPA. We have projected out over the next couple of years a number of projects township-wide that we plan to use ARPA funds. But as Commissioner Trombetta indicated, ARPA includes within it special targeted purposes for folks disproportionately affected. We know that seniors have been disproportionately affected by COVID and by the pandemic. And the state has provided for us, fortunately, basically a already prefabricated means of determining this. So, if we're worried about fraud, I'm sure our people will use all the best practices they have available to prevent anybody from fraudulently getting these $500. But the worry that one person out of 1,000 will do something criminal is not a reason for us to punish 999 who would do it right. So that just isn't how we've done things to date. And I don't think a few stolen checks out of mailboxes should make us rethink programs like this. But those are my thoughts.
And don't get me wrong here. I understand, because most of my calls a lot are from seniors or from friends of seniors on how we can help them in a long run. So I'm willing to work on this, and for them to get some money of some sort, if that's what we could do in some way. But I just want to cross the T's and dot the I's on everything. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think what's important for people to understand is we are not talking about a binary issue. We did not go into this conversation with the idea that the last $302,000 available should go to this group. We are still going through the process of allocating a significant portion of our ARPA funds. And this is an idea that one of our colleagues has investigated and looked to other municipalities and look to the state for purposes of guidance on this. If there is a program that somebody can articulate that can help people that fits within the confines of the ARPA restrictions that benefit folks who've been hurt by the pandemic, who don't satisfy the three conditions that are in this particular bill, but otherwise satisfy the concerns we have, I'd say let's put it in front of the board and consider it. Just like we consider this one.
What is the deadline for the use of the ARPA money?
The money has to be spent by, actually, I'm going to, Ms. Cuthbertson, if you'd answer that.
Okay, it has to be spent by 12/31 of '26 and allocated by 12/31 of '24.
Allocated by 24, okay.
I assume with allocations by 24, is that not unlike, inducement resolutions and other things that you could, does that need to be specific and to the penny, or can you do similar programs if something in 25 or
2024 is approaching a little, time is moving. Language is getting a little bit more tighter on what allocated really means. I've read articles that it means a purchase order issued, contracts entered into, budgets, designed around things like that. So I think that will continue as we get closer to 24, that language will tighten.
So I think it would be smart as part of the budgeting process at the end of 23 for us to be brought up to date on the most recent iterations of what allocation really means. And then we may take, because as of right now, we've got aspirational allocations of ARPA funds through the end of 26, but we may want to tighten that up and make commitments as we get into 24, depending on how you see the language moving.
We will.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Obviously, this will be something that we'll address again at our next work session in March, and then barring incident, it should be before the board at the regularly scheduled March meeting. We now move to commissioner committee updates. Are there any committee chairs, vice chairs who'd like to discuss their committees?
Mr. President,
Yes.
two things.
All right.
One is somewhat tangent, the Health Advisory Commission. The Delaware County Health Department is going to be sponsoring a COVID booster clinic here on February 14th between 10 and 2. It's for ages 12 and up. Pre-registration is recommended. You can register on the township website. There will also be health department representatives there. February is Heart Health Month. There'll be information about heart health. There'll also going to be information about services that the county offers in regards to mental health, drug and alcohol abuse, and other issues. So February 14th, you can get more information on the website.
Thank you. Commissioner Hart, do you, just off the top of your head, and don't say it if you don't know it, at this point in boosters, would this be, are there any limitations on boosters with regard to timing or with regard to age or with regard to how many you've had?
There is a limitation on, you can have had 2 boosters. And there's some limitations on how close you could get them. I can't give you the exact, usually about 3 months or about 3 months after. But this was, the clinic also, if you haven't gotten the vaccine, it's for anything. So it's boosters, or if you just want to, if you haven't gotten the vaccine yet,
Okay.
it would also be
I mean, that's worth stating, that anytime you have the opportunity, if you've never gotten the vaccine, to go to one of these, sure, the booster itself is useful as a first vaccine,
right.
or they give you a separate vaccine for that.
Well, you would start with the first vaccine if you haven't gotten any vaccine at all, but otherwise you'd be getting the booster.
Do they do that at booster clinics? Do they have original vaccine?
Yes.
So that's okay.
And they have both Moderna and the Pfizer. They have both vaccines.
And I guess people should bring their vaccine passport.
Exactly.
Any other commissioner committee updates?
I have one other thing.
Oh, yes, please.
For the, in regards to the Parks Department, this past Saturday, the Parks Department, along with the Haverford Trails Group and Delaware County Trails Alliance, sponsored the 11th Annual Western Trails Summit. It was an opportunity, so this is really a great gathering. It's probably 80 to 100 people there, discuss towns throughout Delaware County, how they're building trails. Haverford had presentations, but it's also very instructive to see what some of the other communities are doing. Upper Darby's doing a lot of work. The idea is to make this interconnected. Delaware County presented with Don Guanella being developed, talked about trying to get trails to get to Don Guanella. So this will be, Darby Creek Trail would certainly be the extension. Will be able to get people much closer to Don Guanella. And also the Bicycle Coalition of Philadelphia and Delaware County presented. And one of the discussions was about the Manoa Road, the Haverford Road diet, and that along with its potential to significantly improve traffic safety, it can have a significant impact on pedestrian and biking safety throughout that area. So I do think that's something that we should be discussing at some point at our meetings here, a township perspective on it.
I can assure you that's going to happen. Any other commissioner committee updates? Okay, we'll move. Chief, do you have a report for us?
Thank you, Commissioners, for the Chief's report for the month of January. We had 24 criminal arrests, 1 juvenile arrest, 171 traffic citations were issued, 7 non-traffic citations, 242 written warnings, and 419 parking tickets. Had a burglary at Carlino's and Sam's Brick Oven Pizza, which I reported on, I believe, last month. We're working with the surrounding townships, Lower Merion and Radnor, because they had similar burglaries on the same night. We had 2 motor vehicle thefts, one on Juniper Road and one on Marybrook. Keys were in both vehicles. We had 10 thefts from autos and attempts, 200 block of Juniper, another one at the 200 block of Juniper, 100 block of Juniper, 1500 block of Delmont, 200 block of Signal, that was a catalytic converter, 400 block of Colfax, and unit block of Darwin. K-9 usage, assist Marple Police, 55 State Road, Upper Providence Township. 3 suspects fled on foot after a vehicle pursuit. K-9 Axel did conduct an area check. 3 actors were located by police. We assisted Lower Merion at 1131 Green Valley Road for responding for possibly burglary. K-9 Bodie did clear the house where no persons were located. And we assisted state police in the Glen Mills area for catalytic converter thefts from the car dealerships. The K-9 truck was unsuccessful. We had 4 mail thefts in the mailboxes which is down considerably from where we were from the past year or so. With Dillon Edmonds, Arlington and Woodmere, which has been hit multiple times at Manoa Shopping Center, and a private mailbox was entered on Brennan Drive. We conducted a coffee with the cop this past weekend at the Creek, which was well attended, and we sent resources to the apartment fire on Friday night during the cold weather to assist the fire department with warming vehicles. And also, for a public service announcement, the police department is accepting applications for a police officer position. Applications and a registration fee must be submitted through Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. to the Haverford Township Human Resources Department, 1014 Darby Road, on or before Wednesday, February 22nd at 3 p.m. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Chief, I asked this at our town hall a week or so ago with the plastic bag ban. I know there have been lots of crime at Giant, Lowe's, Kohl's, and stuff. And has there been the increase in that because of plastic bag ban? Because I just asked that because I get calls asking me that, so just thought I'd ask you that.
It's a very good question. The stores would never tell us if they saw an increase, but you see what we've been reporting every week. Every time we have a theft, a shoplifting theft, we put it on social media, and you see a lot of times, especially Kohl's, are walking out pushing multiple shopping baskets full of clothing. We had met with the some managers and security people at those 3 stores and made some considerable progress to get some more cooperation, and we are making arrests. We have some security plans that we're moving forward with those stores. So, but I can't answer that question directly yet.
That's why I asked it, because I wanted to get the input from you to see what you've heard or saw. So thank you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Chief, have you seen a significant increase in retail thefts, or is it you're able to capture the images more and that's what's showing on social media?
Captured the images more, and we made a decision to start putting it on social media. But yes, there has been a definite increase, especially along that corridor down there. And when the word's out that prosecution is not going to happen because the stores have policies, this is what happens. But I think we're making some headway there, and this is their store policy, not single stores. The whole chain. They don't want to get employees injured. I understand that, but it reaches a point where it is affecting our town and how we live. And I think this is why we wanted to meet with them, made it clear this is unacceptable to us. We want to buckle down on this stuff.
Chief, when you say policy, is it a policy to not interfere with somebody trying to shoplift?
That's correct. They don't want employees to get hurt, but I will give them credit. They have increased security at the stores where we're getting the calls as it's happening or just as they walk out the door, not 2 days later. Before the policy was, we'll come in, give you the reports, here's the video. Detectives can work on it. It's impossible. We don't have license plates or anything like that. We just have faces. But since we had spoken to them, they have increased security dramatically. Kohl's has always been very good with their security force. The person that works there, she's been there since it's been Clover, so she knows the business well, but because of corporate policy, they're limited to what they can do.
Now, to the extent, and this is more focused on those people who have been caught shoplifting and arrested, do you have any feedback with regards to, as they made their way through the criminal justice system, were these people, where do things stand with them actually being held accountable for their actions?
You know how slow the criminal justice system works. By the time it makes it through the system, we all the detectives handle it. A lot of times we're pleased, but most of these people we arrest are, I won't call them serial shoplifters, but they have a long, long history of shoplifting. So it's not like this person going and stealing a loaf of bread. They're stealing big, big ticket items. You see what we put out there. They go to Lowe's and take drills, high dollar stuff. When you go down there, everything's locked up. You can't pick anything out anymore because everything's chained up, which is very sad.
Are the stores cooperating with the prosecution? Because I know obviously they need to be the ones that provide the witnesses and stuff like that.
Yes, they are. We've made, like I said, made great improvement. We expect to do more with them. So.
The only other thing I would ask, and unrelated to that, is I believe that in response to some feedback you had received from some residents, there had been some adjustments made to the time increments on the parking app. Is that?
Yeah, we thank you for reminding
me
of that. Yes, we lowered that to 1.5 hour after some comments from the ward meeting we had 2 weeks ago, I think. So we did readjust that to make it a half an hour, and we're in discussion with a couple other things to try and soothe some rattled people over this new system. So, changes are difficult, and some people just aren't up to speed with social media. We understand that, and using those apps. So we're working towards, fine tuning that a little bit.
I heard somebody got 2 tickets on 2 different cars.
They
on the
did.
same
They
day
did.
in the same
You know
parking
that-
lot.
you know who that person is?
I heard that. I know that person very well, as a matter of fact. Chief, it mattered to me that you confirmed to the public that I paid both of those tickets.
I will confirm, Commissioner, you did pay them. Yes.
Okay, all right, that matters to me. Chief, I do have some questions for you. My humorous introduction does not match the questions. Chief, we all watched something horrifying in Memphis just last week, 2 weeks ago. And there's a lot of talk about de-escalation, and any objective view of that film reveals that not only was there not de-escalating, but there was escalating, and the escalating seemed to be on the part of the police officers. It's very hard for people to see that. It's very hard for people to understand that, and it's very important for people to understand the importance of the exact opposite of that, but de-escalation and de-escalation techniques. So I do need you to address, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but that's my job and it's yours, to address those concerns and to talk again with us about how important and how serious the training is of de-escalation here in Haverford Township.
Yes, Commissioner. We all watch that, and it is horrifying, and I make a policy not to comment on ongoing police investigations. Just what happened down there is we all see it. We all have our feelings on it. It was not pleasant to look at. But yes, we started that training 3-4 years ago at de-escalation. It's a continuing process. We went so far to have 2 of our sergeants who are trained in de-escalation techniques, so we do it in-house. They are certified through MOPEC to do that training. So, and I'll read exactly what we... MOPEC is our police training, which is certified by the state municipal police training authority. So, and this is what we did in 2022. 23, obviously, we already have plans in effect of what we're going to do to continue this training. Some training has to be done regularly just so you stay fresh with it, new techniques. And we encounter this every day. So in February or March of 2022, all members of the department completed the mandatory control tactics and use of force portions for our annual training requirement. This included multiple blocks of instruction on a variety of topics, 8-hour training block, including but not limited to a review of department policy, state and federal case law surrounding officer use of force, open-handed takedown and escort holds for both single and multiple officers, handcuffing of non-compliant individuals, handcuffing seated and prone individuals, moving handcuffed subjects into a recovery position, safely standing a handcuffed individual. In June of 2022, members of the department were offered additional training. Specifically, participating officers received a 1-hour block of instruction how to safely extract non-compliant subject from a motor vehicle. And that's one of the things that we saw in that video. Officers also received training on open hand takedown and escort techniques. This instruction included single and multiple officer tactics, and 31 officers received this training. November of 22, members of this department were again offered additional training, and they provided 1-hour intensive review of open-handed escorts. Now, we do this right here in the building. This is actually hands-on training. The officers come in plain clothes or dressed-down clothes and actually spend all day in our training on mats actually doing this training. So it's very physical, it's very hands-on. So we take it very seriously, and it's one of those, the tools of what we carry can be lethal. So, we do have de-escalation techniques written into our policies, and we have use of force written into our policies also. And remember, when we were certified as an accredited police agency, that's one of the things we had to have up to date and continue to have that up to date on a yearly basis. In fact, we're under review right now with the accreditation policies and the accreditation agency.
Thank you, Chief. Do any of my other colleagues have any questions for the Chief?
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next week, we have a number of items on our agenda. We have 2 traffic ordinances. We have renewal of the lease agreement at the stadium. We have a transfer of funds. We have, as Mr. Schlesinger presented to us earlier, a resolution before us to select an underwriter for the 2023 bond. And we also have a resolution for our consideration to commemorate and recognize Black History Month. Next week, we will also have a professional services contract for the work on the stone veneer on the front of the township building. We have a rebid of the cooling towers for the stadium and the Pensy Trail Phase 2 contract. Purchases by the police department of various vehicles, the public works department of various vehicles, and the Parks and Rec department for some fencing at Hilltop Field and trash receptacles for numerous parks. Before us remain a couple open appointments. We have a opening for an alternate to serve on our Civil Service Commission. We have 2 positions for the Human Relations Commission, and we have 1 position for the Ice Rink Advisory Board and 1 position for the Shade Tree Commission. I would ask the public once again to anybody interested in being considered for those positions to send a resume to reorganization@haverfordtownship.org, or if they just want to send something to Mr. Berman, D. Berman, at haverfordtownship.org, or havtwip, havtwp.org. And the board is going to schedule interviews sometime in the next several weeks to consider those positions. There remains an appointment to the Environmental Advisory Committee by the recalcitrant 6th Ward Commissioner, and I appoint Mr. Rob Graff. And since this is a commissioner appointment and not an official appointment of the board, it is an action I am allowed to take tonight and thank Mr. Graff for his past and continued service on that committee. But I remain in need of a volunteer for the Senior Citizens Advisory Board from the 6th Ward. And so anybody interested, please email, and I will consider and make that appointment. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments on the ordinances, resolutions, contracts, or appointments that just the ordinances, resolutions, contracts, or purchases from next week?
I do have a question with regards to the lease agreement at the stadium.
Yes.
And I don't know, maybe I missed it. I don't think I saw a copy of it attached to the packet. Can someone just tell me what lease agreement that references?
It's for the pro shop.
It's for the pro shop.
We've had a 2-year lease with them for several years, and they're up for renewal.
Okay.
But I can definitely circulate that to the board well in advance of Monday.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Also on the agenda for next week, and thank you for reminding me, Mr. Berman, and this will take place early in our meeting, the board is to consider the recommended promotion of one of our officers in the police department. One last time, any questions or comments from my colleagues on any of the items on the agenda? Anything anybody would like to say before we close? Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.